And welcome to FISM News. I'm Samuel Case.
And I'm Renata Kiss.
And tonight, Trump's hush money trial finally comes to an end.
Meanwhile, the aid pier in Gaza falls apart.
And pregnancy centers across the country spend a fortune saving lives. But first, Texas cannot seem to catch a break this week with the wild weather as deadly storms are expected to continue. More than 320,000 people are currently without power after yesterday's storms, coming only days after a weekend storm system left 22 people dead across multiple states. That, of course, includes Texas as well. Dallas County officials have issued a state of emergency as the power outage is expected to last several more days. At the height of the bad weather, more than 800,000 homes and businesses in north central Texas were without power. Meanwhile, authorities in Houston are also bracing for harsh weather today, as high temperatures are expected to cause additional rainfall, with local forecasts warning of possible flooding, at least in some areas.
And in some national and political news, the hush money trial against former President Trump has wrapped up and gone to the jury. FISM's Ian Patrick breaks down some of those details now.
Closing arguments wrapped up yesterday in the New York criminal trial against Donald Trump. The jury now begins its deliberations, so let's take a look at how the trial has progressed so far. The trial itself has Trump facing 34 felony counts of falsifying business documents, specifically to cover up a hush money payment made out to adult film actress Stormy Daniels. According to the trial, the payment was worth around $130,000. The prosecution's case was built around the idea that Trump acted in this way to commit an underlying crime. However, it wasn't even until today that said underlying crime was even defined, at least somewhat. New York prosecutor Joshua Steinglass said during closing arguments that the payment itself was an attempt to, quote, hoodwink the American voter, specifically during the 2016 election. Meanwhile, Trump's defense team cast the former president as a victim of extortion. Trump lawyer Todd Blanche said that Daniels threatened to go public with her story of a sexual encounter with the former president during a time where he was also battling multiple unflattering stories, and this was near the end of the 2016 election. Blanche also threw star witness Michael Cohen under the bus, saying that he's a convicted felon with a long track record of lying. And in fact, Cohen's testimony was almost entirely dismissed by Judge Juan Merchan, who told jurors today that they cannot rely solely on his word to decide Trump's fate. But it's still the prosecution's underlying crime that has really taken center stage. Speaking with Fox News prior to closing, former Assistant U.S. Attorney Andy McCarthy said the prosecution had not been clear on the president's charges.
We have a situation where the statute doesn't prescribe clearly what the state says Trump did that makes him guilty. The indictment doesn't put him on notice of the trial or of the crime. We've had a 5-week trial, 5 weeks of testimony. After opening statements, we're right on the verge of summations, and it's still not clear what they say he did. It's like they're making up a crime as they go along.
Trump legal spokesperson Alina Habba had similar complaints, saying the prosecution did not give any evidence that Trump intended to commit a crime.
They could not give us any evidence. It was a lot of noise, and that's what we keep seeing, Jesse. There was not one bit of evidence that showed that Donald Trump had an intent to commit any crime. And I'm still, as I sit here as an attorney, trying to understand how they could have possibly brought this at this point, wasted this much taxpayer dollars, past the statute of limitations, and then had the audacity to make a jury sit there until 8 o'clock with a bunch of nonsense and shiny balls, as she just said, because that's all they've got. They've got no facts.
In fact, the general consensus among many legal experts seems to be that the prosecution did not bring a complete enough case before the court, and that could bungle their case altogether. But as the jury's decision looms, Trump still isn't giving up on the idea of running for president. Prior to the closing arguments, he took a few final jabs at Biden, the judge, and the case as a whole.
I'm here because of crooked Joe Biden, the worst president in the history of our country. Is destroying our country. And he's also destroying it with weaponization. And this is purely his weaponization. But this is all election hunting, election interfering. It's going after Joe Biden's political opponent because he can't do it himself, and they're helping out. And we have a judge who's highly conflicted. He happens to be corrupt.
This is Ian Patrick reporting for FISM News.
Thanks, Ian. Meanwhile, it was quite a strange scene outside the courtroom yesterday as well, as the Biden campaign held a press event featuring Democrat actor Robert De Niro, who slammed Trump as a, quote, danger to the country.
Under Trump, this kind of government will perish from the earth. I don't mean to scare you. No, wait, maybe I do mean to scare you. If Trump returns to the White House, you can kiss these freedoms goodbye that we all take for granted. And elections, forget about it. That's over. That's done. If he gets in, I can tell you right now, he will never leave.
Trump supporters could be heard heckling De Niro elsewhere during his speech. The actor was also joined by the Biden campaign's communications director, Michael Tyler. He called Trump a chaos agent who threatens American democracy and freedoms. Meanwhile, Trump, for his part, he responded to the presser, calling De Niro a, quote, wacko who suffers from an incurable case of Trump derangement syndrome.
Meanwhile, the question of why Joe Biden used pseudonym email accounts has resurfaced following a new bombshell revelation. A new batch of emails released over Memorial Day weekend shows that Biden received sensitive communications through his made-up identities while serving as vice president. The latest release reveals frequent emails from John Brennan and Antony Blinken, both high-ranking national security advisors at the time. The president has never explained his use of pseudonyms or private emails, which are more vulnerable to hacking. The emails were never forwarded to a government account, which violates transparency laws. The National Archives released the latest batch as part of an ongoing lawsuit brought by Just the News. The archives say they have thousands of emails connected to known Biden pseudonyms, but have so far resisted releasing all of them.
Elsewhere, Democrats are still scrambling to get President Biden on the ballot in Ohio before the state's certification deadline on August 7th. The whole problem here is that the deadline is more than a week before the Democratic National Convention on August 19th, when Biden will become the party's official nominee. The DNC is now pushing to nominate Biden virtually, similar to how they did during the COVID-19 pandemic before the deadline. Meanwhile, state lawmakers are holding a special session this week to hopefully pass legislation ensuring Biden will be on the ballot at the urging of Republican Governor Mike DeWine.
Ohio is running out of time to get Joe Biden, the sitting president of the United States, on the ballot this fall. Failing to do so is simply not acceptable. This is a ridiculous, this is an absurd situation.
But that's not the DNC's only concern. Several Democrats are now telling the Daily Caller they're also afraid that anti-Israel protesters could disrupt the upcoming convention, possibly creating a PR nightmare for the Biden campaign. Dozens of far-left organizations are planning a so-called March on the DNC when the convention is set to begin. The threat of protest is leading to even more calls for a virtual convention.
Meanwhile, another Biden official resigns amid growing conflict over the administration's policies in Gaza. State Department official Stacey Gilbert announced her resignation this week. According to the Washington Post, she sent an email to her department saying they were wrong to conclude that Israel wasn't blocking humanitarian aid in Gaza. This comes as the Biden administration struggles with internal conflict regarding Israel's role in the war. Critics of the administration say that military aid continues to flow to Israel despite the country blocking aid from Gaza. Now, Israel did admit earlier that there were times when they stopped aid from going into Gaza because Hamas was looting the supplies. Disruptions to aid deliveries have been quite frequent as the war between Hamas and Israel rages on. And we'll get into international news up next. We'll be right back.
FISM News is a conservative news outlet bringing you the latest updates from a biblical worldview. With us, you get just the news grounded in truth. And now with the new FISM TV app, you can take FISM News with you wherever you go, so you're never behind on what's happening. We update the app regularly with short clips you can watch at your convenience. So go ahead, visit the App Store and download the FISM TV app. Start exploring all of our content anytime, anywhere.
There are moments in life that define us. Choices determine the courses we take. Choices that create life, or those that save a life. And some make life worthwhile. There are decisions to stay or to go, to remain the same or to grow. Sometimes we pray and make peace. Other times we take a stand for what we believe. In celebration, mourning, triumph, and defeat, we are invested in every decision we seek. Despite differences, we have one thing in common: the desire to do all for the glory of God. Keep your wallet aligned with your heart and your investments in harmony with your faith. Timothy Plan, biblically responsible mutual funds, ETFs, and retirement plans. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing.
Hi, I'm Aisha. At first, I was debating whether or not I was really pregnant and took a test. While I was waiting, they talked to me about different pregnancy choices and different options and information that helped me be more educated. To confirm, I got an ultrasound of the pregnancy test, and it was for sure positive, and I got to hear and see my baby for the first time. Hearing the heartbeat made me cry, and it was certain that I was going to keep my baby forever.
All right, and welcome back to FISM News. I'm Samuel Case. We start our segment now with a historic moment in Gaza where Israeli tanks have reportedly entered the heart of Rafah for the first time in the war. Israel remains determined to destroy the remaining Hamas battalions hiding in Rafah, rejecting calls from the International Court of Justice to leave the city. Meanwhile, the White House says it still opposes Israel's operation in Rafah, but at the same time says Israel still hasn't crossed Biden's red line against a full-scale invasion.
Can you explain how the strike in Rafah does not cross the lines that the president has set and many of you have repeated, that the operations be targeted and limited?
We still don't believe that a major ground operation in Rafah is warranted. We still don't want to see the Israelis, as we say, smash into Rafah with large units over large pieces of territory. We still believe that. And we haven't seen that at this point. But we're going to be watching this, of course, very, very closely.
Meanwhile, as we mentioned before the break, aid deliveries to Gaza continue to face obstacles. This time, the rough seas damaged the U.S.-built pier, which is now under repair. As a result, Washington had to pause aid deliveries. Pentagon Deputy Sabrina Singh said the repairs will likely take over a week, but she added that the aid is ready to go.
Some of that aid will be unloaded onto some of our vessels, so it's pre-positioned, and so when the temporary pier is re-anchored back onto the shore, we're pretty much ready to roll off right away.
The temporary pier, like she said, is off the coast of Gaza, was constructed so that the aid could continue into the region as land deliveries become difficult to carry out without interceptions. However, aid workers criticized the pier for its lack of efficiency, which is now compacted by a lengthy repair after only 2 weeks of operation. However, when a reporter asked Singh if the U.S.-led aid effort was ultimately a failure, she strongly denied it.
In those 2 weeks, what I would say is that over 1,000 metric tons of aid got to the people in Gaza. So I don't think that's a total loss. I think it's pretty important for the people that are suffering right now, that are in a dire humanitarian situation, to get whatever aid they can by whatever means. If you want to characterize it as a failure, I leave it to you. You better believe that U.S. Central Command forces are going to do everything in their power to make sure that this is back and operational as soon as possible.
And Canada's temporary visas for Gazans just increased 5-fold as Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is now granting up to 5,000 visas for those fleeing the conflict. That's a drastic increase from the only 1,000 he promised in December. Trudeau says he increased the number to keep families together, and a government spokesman says that roughly 200 visas have already been filed under the program so far, but the visa program is dependent currently on cooperation from Egypt and Israel, and at this time, most people are not able to leave Gaza. That decision comes as Trudeau is blasting the Israeli government following Rafah airstrikes that sadly killed civilians.
We are horrified by the Israeli strikes that killed civilians in Rafah. The scale of the human suffering and tragedy we're seeing in Gaza must cease. Canada in no way supports the military operations by Israel in Rafah. Indeed, we have been calling for a ceasefire, including at the UN, since December, and will continue to.
And it looks like Poland wants to keep Russia guessing in the Ukraine war. According to the Associated Press, Polish Foreign Minister Radek Sikorski told a Polish news outlet that his country should not rule out sending troops to Ukraine. He said, quote, "We should not exclude any option. Let Putin be guessing as to what we will do." The foreign minister's announcement comes as France has made similar remarks earlier this year. No other European countries except these two have made such a statement so far. However, a spokesperson for the Polish Defense Ministry denied hearing such plans from his country.
Elsewhere, 6 people were arrested for the first time yesterday under Hong Kong's new anti-sedition law. National police accused them of spreading hatred against Hong Kong and China on social media. Pro-Beijing politicians passed the law earlier this year, despite accusations that they've silenced dissenting views since 2020. The arrests include pro-democracy activist Chow Hang-tung. She's been held at a maximum security prison since 2021 for leading illegal street protests. Specifically, what she did was she led candlelight vigils on the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre, and authorities now say that she was behind recent Facebook posts encouraging citizens to take part in this year's anniversary protest, which is coming up on June 4th. All 6 of the accused now face up to 7 years in prison.
Meanwhile, tens of thousands of Armenian protesters are calling for the resignation of Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. The outrage comes as Armenia handed over several of its border villages to Azerbaijan this past month. The police arrested 196 people as the protesters blocked the main streets in the capital city earlier this week. The demonstration was part of a larger movement initially led by a high-ranking cleric at the Armenian Apostolic Church. Since then, the movement snowballed into a larger political effort against the prime minister and his government. This comes as the prime minister has advocated for a quick resolution to Armenia's border to avoid further conflict with Azerbaijan. And we'll return for national news coming up next, but first let's go to Seth Yudinsky for a moment in history.
Welcome back to A Moment in History. I'm Seth Yudinsky. Well, for over 1,100 years throughout the medieval period, the Eastern Roman Empire survived under the original name of its capital city, the Byzantine Empire. The empire started strong under Constantine and reached its peak with Justinian the Great in the 6th century AD, but it quickly became sandwiched between 2 dominant forces, Latin Christendom in the west and a rapidly rising Islamic contingent in the east. It was caught in the middle of a titanic struggle between these 2 forces to gain control of the Holy Land. Now, during this struggle, for a brief time, the empire was actually officially eliminated by the invading Westerners. In this moment in history, let's go back to the short-lived Latin Empire of Constantinople from 1204 to 1261. Now, the Latin Empire began in 1204 when Crusaders, originally meant to descend upon Egypt, turned course and attacked their Christian brothers in the east. It is one of the darker moments in Christian history and one of the most glaring examples of division within Christendom at this time. The Crusaders sacked the capital city of Constantinople and deposed the Emperor Alexios V. They established Baldwin, Count of Flanders, as the first king of the Latin Empire of Constantinople. Now, truth be told, there was nothing radically impressive about this empire. In fact, it's difficult to even grant it the name of an empire because of how small it was and how short-lived it was. From a purely militaristic standpoint, it would have been a golden opportunity for the Western Christians to gain a significant foothold in the Eastern Mediterranean, and it could have provided the chance to strike back at Islam and retake Jerusalem, which had been tragically lost only a generation before the takeover of Constantinople. But the Latin army and the nobles simply failed to capitalize. Now, what's even worse It killed any hope of a reunion between Eastern and Western Christianity. Historians often wonder what could have happened had the East and West not fractured in 1054 and if they had been united at the start of the Crusades. Perhaps Jerusalem never would have been lost and would be in Christian hands today. Well, regardless, the Latin Empire lasted a mere 57 years and did not in any significant way help the Christians retake the Holy Land. The Eastern Christians regained their capital city in 1261, thereby rejuvenating the Byzantine Empire, but the damage was done and the empire never recovered before it was finally permanently destroyed in 1453 by the Ottoman Turks. Thanks so much for joining me once again for a moment in history.
The miracle of carrying a child creates a unique bond between a mother and her unborn baby. She feels the baby's movements and responds to their needs even before birth. Help create that bond between an abortion-minded mother and her unborn child by giving the gift of life through Preborn. During the month of May, you can bless your mom for Mother's Day by giving to Preborn on your mother's behalf. For $28, you can sponsor an ultrasound scan that will enable an abortion-minded woman to hear the heartbeat of her baby. 90% of the time, that sound will change a woman's mind and cause her to keep their baby. Give the gift of life to the woman that gave you life by sponsoring an ultrasound. Go to preborn.com/FISM to give. That's preborn.com/FISM. You can help an abortion-minded mother receive discipleship, encouragement, and the strength needed to have her baby.
Did you know that you can always listen and watch Financial Issues online? Just go to financialissues.org/live or download the FISM TV app in the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. We stream our show every weekday morning starting at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. If you're looking for a biblical take on investing and current events and how it relates to the money that God has given you, then you don't want to miss Financial Issues.
And welcome back to FISM News. I'm Renata Kiss. Well, let's continue with some coverage on the border crisis. Earlier this week, an organization combating drug use announced that it has found high fentanyl use among migrants crossing the southern border. The alert came from the harm reduction in the Compañeros program. The group's coordinator, Julian Rojas Padilla, told reporters that combinations of fentanyl and other dangerous drugs have become popular in border cities like Ciudad Juarez. Rojas further warned that the rate of migrant drug abuse has seen a notable increase, while many of these people will seek entry into the United States. The group warned that fentanyl is often difficult to detect and highly lethal. The news follows a recent report from the National Commission on Mental Health and Addictions, which reported a 29% increase in fentanyl abuse from the past year.
And Argentina's President Javier Milei is in San Francisco this week, meeting with the leaders of Google, Meta, and Apple. He's scheduled to meet with all three of those companies' CEOs sometime this week. And while the details are still unknown, the meetings are believed to be about Argentina's vast lithium resources. That's the metal used in most modern-day technology. During a previous meeting, Elon Musk told Milei he is extremely interested in Argentina's lithium, production for which is expected to triple this year. Milei, for his part, is hoping his meetings will ultimately lead to investments in Argentina's tech and space sectors. Meanwhile, he is also expected to meet with representatives from OpenAI and have a second meeting with Elon Musk sometime next month.
Meanwhile, a massive abortion pill stockpile remains untouched in Massachusetts, more than a year after Democratic leaders created it. Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey ordered a mass quantity of mifepristone last year as pro-life doctors challenged the drug's safety in court. Amherst College purchased 15,000 doses, an estimated year's supply, which they then transferred to the state's health department. Here's the governor announcing that last year.
At my request, the University of Massachusetts Amherst agreed to purchase approximately 15,000 doses of mifepristone. That's enough, that's sufficient to ensure coverage for well over a year. I am grateful to UMass President Meehan, to Chancellor Sabaswamy, and the entire UMass team who readily agreed and stepped forward, jumping right into action.
Democrats widely responded to the move with glowing accolades, but the stockpile remains untouched today, according to a spokesperson for the governor's office. The Supreme Court heard arguments challenging the Food and Drug Administration's approval of the abortion medication back in March. Pro-life doctors also challenged the FDA's decisions to loosen restrictions on the drug, allowing providers to mail the drug without an in-person consult. The justices are expected to announce their final decision this summer.
Meanwhile, on the pro-life side, we have some exciting news. A new report is showing the lengths that pro-lifers are going in order to save the lives of unborn babies. We are now learning that pro-life pregnancy centers provided over $367 million worth of services in 2022 alone. That, of course, is the same exact year that Roe v. Wade was finally overturned. Now, that's according to a new report from the pro-life Charlotte Lucier Institute. And it says that that number is more than 1/3 the amount of money originally seen in 2019. That, of course, goes to provide numerous services, including providing diapers, ultrasounds, healthcare, and other needs for young mothers and their families as well. And of course, you can help mothers choose life today by donating to our friends over at Preborn as well. There are only 3 days left to go for their annual Mother's Day drive. We've already raised enough money to provide 50 ultrasound machines to pro-life centers around the country. So you can donate to them at preborn.com/FISM. Again, to donate, go to preborn.com/FISM today.
That's encouraging to hear, of course. Well, lastly, we have another uplifting story here. An Ohio billionaire is attempting a new submersible voyage to view the Titanic. Real estate investor Larry Connor is giving the 12,000-foot deep dive another chance, despite last year's OceanGate accident, which killed all passengers on board. Connor is partnering with Triton Submarines co-founder Patrick Leahy to build the two-person submersible. According to Leahy, the rich businessman was optimistic, saying that last year's accident was a one-time event and not the rule. The new submersible will cost $20 million and will be able to dive to 4,000 meters. The Titanic sits at 3,800 meters. Connor told the Wall Street Journal, quote, "While the ocean is extremely powerful, it can be wonderful and enjoyable and really kind of life-changing if you go about it the right way."
And, you know, Renata, I know a lot of people are making fun of this guy, thinking it's so dangerous. We just saw the accident last year, but I kind of have to say good on him. Don't be afraid to not pursue your dreams just because something bad happens, because he's right. That really was just a one-off incident, as terrible as it was.
Right. And I think, unfortunately, people just became so skeptical of anything like this because of the sudden collapse of the OceanGate last year.
Right,
so I think that's just scary and shocking for people to know about that.
But you have to put it in perspective, of course, because people do dangerous things all the time. I don't even know how many people say climb Mount Everest every year. It's very dangerous, and yet people do it, and we applaud them for it. I think we should applaud things like this as well.
Yes, of course. All right, well, that's our program for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and please visit FISMnews.tv for more content.
And for more updates until our next show, be sure to follow us on social media. You can find us by typing in FISM News, or you can also download the FISM app to take us on the go. Thanks so much, and we'll catch you tomorrow with more news.